Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I do appreciate you being with me here on Now TV. Be sure to join me every single Friday, 9:30 Central Time, 10:30 Eastern. And by the way, be sure to catch my friend and lifelong friend, almost, William Bell. He is on Now TV every Saturday afternoon. You don't want to miss his material. I want to tell you, William is a man that, in my estimation, is one of the best Bible students that I have ever met in my life. He always challenges me. He always brings out new insights that I'm going, oh my goodness gracious, that's awesome. So be sure to catch William Bell. Also, you can check out his website, All Things Fulfilled. That's allthingsfulfilled.com. And you'll find there tons of videos. William doesn't write as much as he does produce videos. So go to his website, www.allthingsfulfilled.com, and there you'll find a ton of material. Also, don't forget, on my website, www.donkpreston.com or www.bibleprophecy.com, and there you will find literally thousands of articles. I had somebody contact me just this week, and they said they have literally reams and reams of paper or of articles that they've printed off of my website because they just can't get enough. They said that they're being set free from the failed eschatology of the historical church, and it's just a thrill and a joy of the things that they are learning. And look, I got my very first contact from Bolivia just recently. I have received contacts from the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, South America, Canada, Japan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel. I mean, people are being set free with the fact that we can now answer the challenge of Christ. Do you remember what the challenge of Christ is that I've been sharing with you for these several months now? Jesus said in John chapter 10, 35 and following, "Do not believe me for my words' sake. Believe me for my works. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me." Okay? Jesus himself said, don't believe me just because I say something. Look, we all know, don't we, that words are not enough? Listen to me very carefully. For how long have we watched TV, listened to the radio, read books by one so-called prophecy expert after another who have told us, this is it, this is the time of the end? In my emails over the last 2 weeks, I've been getting emails from some individual. I suspect that he's a very honest, very sincere, very dedicated, very zealous, obviously, individual. And he's told me that without any shadow of a doubt, 2021 is the time of the fulfillment of Daniel's 70 weeks. The end is near. We must prepare. Now, I've written back to this gentleman at least 3 times now, and I've said to him, no, Daniel's 70 weeks were fulfilled in the first century. Your prediction, with all due respect, is wrong. But we've all witnessed this. The late 1980s, countdown to Armageddon, the late great planet Earth. 88 reasons why the rapture will be in 1988. Whoops, 89 reasons why the rapture will be in 1989. These false predictions bring shame and dishonor on the name of Christ. Listen, with the recent killing of the the head of the Iranian Quds force, guilty of spreading terrorism, hate, murder, bloodshed throughout the world. Already the prophecy pundits are out. Oh, this is it. I had a person, as it were, accost me on Facebook just the other day, right after that happened, and he said, Trump doesn't understand what he has unleashed. Iran, he actually said Syria is Gog and Magog. This proves it. We're in the time. This is the time of the end. And I responded and I said, no, this is not the time of the end. There may be bloodshed, there may be war, but it's not the fulfillment of prophecy. Because you see, when Jesus said, pardon me, do not believe me for my words' sake, believe me for my works. Jesus was saying, if I don't perform the works that the Father's given me, you need to reject me as the Son of God. Listen, folks, should we not be rejecting? Absolutely rejecting John Hagee and his failed blood moons prophecies? His prediction that the rapture would be in 1999? Hal Lindsey and his failed predictions? Edward Whisenant? Should we not be rejecting the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons? And all of the other eschatological groups and individuals that have sprung up and told us, oh, well, 1914 is the year. Oh, wait, 1915, 1917. Oh, wait, 1925. Millions now living will never die. Should we not be absolutely, categorically rejecting that type of individual and their groups? After all, don't believe me for my words, believe me for my works. Since those men made false predictions, they are to be rejected. I understand that's powerful, but it's biblical. Now remember, Jesus unequivocally predicted Matthew 16, 27 and 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here, that was 2,000 years ago, I can safely assume, in spite of what the Mormons say, I can safely assume we don't have any 2,000-year-old people running around on earth today. Now that means one of two things. Jesus' prediction failed, and we're to reject him. Remember what he said? If I do not do what my Father gave me to do, don't believe me. Or, guess what? He came. Now, pretty clearly, he did not come as historical Christianity demands that he came. He did not come out of heaven in a physical body as a 5'5" Jewish man riding on a literal cloud. He did not destroy literal physical heaven and earth. I'm currently reviewing a book by a man named Lance Conley. The name of the book is Hope Resurrected. And Mr. Conley says time statements don't mean a thing in the world. He says that when the Bible writers use time statements, they're not using them in regard to eschatology. They're not using those time words in the same way that you and I would use time words. They only use time words in the way that we would if they're talking about non-eschatological things. Now, my question is, where is that rule written in any book of hermeneutic, of biblical interpretation? You can't find it, folks. It's not there. The only reason that Mr. Conley makes that claim is because he knows without a shadow of a doubt that if he admits for even one moment, and listen to me very carefully, it's not just Mr. Conley. Every futurist in all of Christianity knows that if Jesus legitimately, objectively predicted, and if his apostles and the New Testament writers objectively predicted that Jesus is coming, the end of the age, the judgment, and the resurrection was to be in the first century, if they truly said objectively that his coming was near, at hand, coming soon, coming shortly, if they said that 2,000 years ago, then the entire history of the historical Christian church is falsified. Because it has said, well, he didn't come, everybody knows that. Oh, so what do? Well, we got to make time statements go away. We've got to make them irrelevant. We've got to turn them into elastic and silly putty that we can just stretch out and turn into utter meaninglessness. Folks, that's not the way to do biblical exegesis, as I've been sharing with you on this program. Did you know that the Bible demands that we understand time statements in the same identical way that we as human beings understand time statements? Did you know that we have examples of God saying something was at hand, coming soon, shortly, and quickly, and man responding by saying, well, you know, one day is with the Lord 1,000 years. 1,000 years as a day. You know, time doesn't mean anything with God. God doesn't look at time like we do, so therefore it's actually a long way off. You know what God's response was to that? He condemned them. You need to read Ezekiel chapter 12, 21 and following. Yeah, go there and read it. Ezekiel 12, 21 and following. Now then, I've shared with you that many people try different ways to escape, to mitigate, to negate Jesus' language in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. They appeal to the Transfiguration. And they say, well, look, here is Jesus' prediction of the coming of the Lord, of his coming in judgment and the kingdom in the lifetime of those people. Well, only 6 days later, he went up into the mount, and there he was transfigured in front of his apostles, scaring them, out of their minds. But hey, that's supposedly the fulfillment of Matthew 16, 27, 28. Well, wait a minute. Jesus, remember, was speaking to a large multitude of people. He wasn't just talking to Peter, James, John, and Andrew. No. He was speaking to a large multitude when he said, some standing here will not taste of death, that is, they will not die, until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So let me ask you a question. If the Transfiguration is the fulfillment of that prediction, we're supposed to believe that only a few of that large multitude survived for 6 days? Seriously? See, it makes no sense. Well, some people try to say, well, yes, Matthew 16, 28 was fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. Well, Pentecost was only 6 months off at the most. So we're supposed to believe that only some of that large multitude survived for 6 months. Here's what makes that untenable. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul spoke of the resurrection of Jesus and how it was witnessed by Peter, by James, by the apostles, and then he said he was seen by over 500 brethren, the most of whom survive to this day. Oh, wow. Let's see. From 33 AD until the writing of 1 Corinthians 15, in Matthew 16, that was approximately 33 AD. The writing of Corinthians, let's put it 56 AD. 23 years. Okay? Let's just round it off 25 years, just for ease of reference. So 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus in 33 AD. And yet in AD 56 or 57, most of them were still alive. And yet we're supposed to believe that only some of the large multitude, which is clearly more than 500, only some of that large multitude survived for 6 days. See, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. It just simply doesn't work. So, we have to understand that I've shared with you before that the Transfiguration was, without any doubt whatsoever, a vision of Jesus' quote, second coming, unquote. To use the Greek term, parousia. Parousia means presence. It's not technically coming, it's presence. We'll have more to say about that as we continue our study of eschatology. Okay. Pardon me. On last week's program, I called your attention to 2 Peter chapter 1. Let me remind you that Peter's second epistle was written for the specific purpose of refuting the scoffers. Let me reiterate what I closed out with last week. The scoffers were not denying the reality of the day of the Lord. If these were, and they almost undoubtedly were, if these were Jewish scoffers, then even the worst of Jewish scoffers knew there had been many days of the Lord. In the Old Testament, there had been many times in which the Lord was said to have come out of heaven. He was said to have come with a shout, in flaming fire, with a hailstorm, and to destroy heaven and earth. Remember all that? Hope you'll go back and watch those videos in which I demonstrate that. Or you can get a copy of my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat, in which I chronicle and I demonstrate the Old Testament use of this language of the coming of the Lord out of heaven on the clouds with fire, with glory, etc., etc., and I show where the language is invariably metaphoric. So, oh, by the way, if you want to go to my website, and this order is for U.S. orders, this offer is for U.S. orders only, you go to my website, you order the book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat, and you send me a note, all right? When you make the payment, send me a note that says, hey, Don, I saw the offer on Now TV. I'll refund your shipping. That will save you $5, okay? Please do that and let me know. Now, again, the scoffers were not denying the reality of the day of the Lord. They knew the Lord had come many times. They were pointing out, almost undoubtedly, that the time for the coming of the Lord, the predicted time for the coming of the Lord, was drawing to a close. I mean, after all, what did Jesus say? The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man. That's the judgment of 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10, 9 and 10. And there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Well, guess what? Peter was one of those standing there that day. He survived. He's writing 2 Peter. But the scoffers are denying the reality of it. Now keep in mind, not only had Jesus predicted his coming in the first century, but in the second epistle, and watch what Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 1. Beloved, I now write to you this second epistle, in both of which I stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance, that you may be mindful of the words which were spoken before by the holy prophets, and of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior. So Peter says, hey, look, a couple of things here. This second epistle, which is about the coming of the Lord, is simply a reminder Number one, of what the Old Testament prophets said. Number two, it is a reminder of what we, the apostles, have said, and it's a reminder of what the Lord himself said. Okay? What did the Old Testament prophets say about the day of the Lord? It was not an earth-burning, cosmos-destroying, end-of-time event in which God came out of heaven in a physical body. Never was. Okay? Point number two, Peter said, I'm reminding you of what we, the apostles, have said. Okay? What did Peter, for instance, say about the day of the Lord? Let me remind you what we saw in the previous video. Peter said that Christ was, quote, ready to be revealed. 1 Peter chapter 1, 5-7. Well, the word ready there is from the Greek word hitoimos, and Alford's Greek Testament says the Greek reader would have understood Peter to be speaking of the imminent judge. Imminent. Not just morally prepared, but ready to judge. On the point of judging. Point number two. Peter said that Christ was ready to be revealed in the last time. And oh, by the way, he said in 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 20, they were living in the last times. Back then, 2,000 years ago. Point number three, Peter said Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. Once again, Greek word hitoimos. Not only morally prepared and qualified to judge, but on the point of judging. He's standing temporally ready to judge 2,000 years ago. Point number four. Peter said, quote, the end of all things has drawn near. Now let's face it, folks. There is literally no escaping this text. If Peter was talking about the dissolution of physical heaven and earth, as so many people believe that he was in 2 Peter chapter 3, and he said, the end of all things has drawn near, the force of the Greek there is in what's known as the perfect tense, and it means that which was not near at one time has now drawn near. That time of fulfillment is upon us, Peter was saying. And so he drives it home in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17, when he says, now watch this, this is critical. It's literally the time. The word time is from the Greek word kairos, and it means literally the appointed time. But he uses the definite article. So it's literally the appointed time. Then he says, for the judgment. The definite article appears before judgment. It's not simply, a time for a judgment has come. No. The appointed time for the judgment has come. Well, he uses what is known as the anaphoric article in verse 17. What in the world is an anaphoric article, you may ask? Well, an anaphoric article, and according to Wallace, who is a world-renowned Greek grammarian, Wallace says the anaphoric article is by far the preponderant use of the definite article in the Greek. And here's the significance of that. Anaphoric means up above. In other words, according to Wallace's definition of the anaphoric article, a speaker or a writer uses the anaphoric article to refer to a subject or a topic that he has spoken about previously, but now he uses the article to designate that he is speaking about that previously mentioned event or subject. That means that 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17 is speaking about verse 5, the judgment of the living and the dead. That's the resurrection. And that means that verse 17, Peter is saying that the appointed time for the judgment of the living and the dead has arrived. What's the challenge of Christ? If he didn't do what he said he was going to, if he did not do what his inspired apostles said he was going to do, don't believe him. You see, the scoffers were well aware of those prophecies and predictions. But Peter, to refute those scoffers, says this, 2 Peter chapter 1, 16 and following. We did not follow cunningly devised fables when we made known to you the power and the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but were eyewitnesses of his majesty. Now this term, power and coming, it's what's known as a Greek hendiades. That's a big fancy term, isn't it? Hendiades. And what it means is that two words are used to describe the same event. It might be rendered as the powerful coming. So Peter is saying here, when we talked to you about the second coming of Christ, we were making known to you and we were describing his coming in power and glory. Okay. For, remember he says, we were eyewitnesses of his glory, of his majesty. For he received from God the Father honor and glory when such a voice came to him from the excellent glory, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." And we heard this voice which came from heaven when we were with him in the holy mountain. And so, based upon what we saw, okay, what did they see? The Transfiguration. Based upon what we saw, we have the prophetic word. What prophetic word? Pardon me. The prophecies of the second coming. Our vision of the Transfiguration confirms the reality of the coming, yet future to Peter, the coming of the Lord. Oh my goodness. So we have the prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to take heed, as a light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns and the morning star arises in your heart. Well, as I've been telling you, we're going to look at the significance of the Transfiguration and how it relates to the second coming and proves beyond a shadow of a doubt Christ was never to come out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man in a physical body. We'll pick it up next week.